Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Another month, another off topic. This month, as you can see, we have Jake. Legends never die. Thanks, Jake, for coming on.
Yeah, man. Excited to finally be on with you guys and go off topic as soon as possible.
Nice. I like it.
Well, that won't be hard.
Right.
Well,
Awesome.
we've got a few things we want to talk to you about. When I think of your channel, one of the first things I think about is Hall of Fame because you have lots of thoughts on the Hall of Fame.
Mm.
And since the last time I spoke with you, and I think Darren spoke with you, there have been some developments with Hall of Fame news. So I think we kind of want to start there and say, what does a Hall of Fame junkie like yourself think about the Pete Rose, Joe Jackson stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah, huge historic news from a Hall of Fame perspective. Dom and I, actually, from Statement Sports Cards, we did a Cracking Cooperstown that night and released it the next morning. So if you want to hear a really in-depth version of that, that's over on my channel. But in a nutshell, I mean, I was shocked that it happened. I didn't think it would happen in my lifetime. I really didn't. But I'm a man of forgiveness, and I think I would be a hypocrite if I didn't apply that to this opinion as well. And I think that Rose should be in. I think that Shoeless Joe should be in. Is the short term of it. It's hard to serve a punishment greater than a lifetime ban for those players. What they did was, at least in Rose's case, what he did was wrong. He broke a rule. He paid the price. And it's not, just because Manfred says, okay, they're off the ineligible list, doesn't just immediately put them in the Hall of Fame. We go in depth on the process of, first the Hall of Fame had to say, okay, since they're off the ineligible list, we are willing to put them on an era ballot, which they have. They did that almost immediately. Now we have to wait 2 years until the next era ballot that they can be on. And even then, they could choose, the committee from the board of directors could choose not to even put them on the ballot, not put them on the ballot at the same time, do one or the other. Then even past that, that board then selects the committee that actually votes on these era committees. So based on the Hall's public or private opinion, they could technically stack that committee however they want,
Right.
pro or anti Rose or Jackson. So there are lots of variables, but the biggest thing that I think came out of it is now it's a non-zero chance that they could be elected.
What do you, now I want to hear Darren's thoughts on this too, but I don't know enough about the whole Hall of Fame process. I mean, I know a little bit, but what what's the reason that, because this is a question that I've had and I don't, you would know as well as anybody, I would know who to ask. Why does it have to be an error committee? Why wouldn't they go on just the first time Hall ballot like a guy who retired however many years ago? Like, I don't understand. Okay, so Ichiro was first eligible this last year and he gets elected in. Like, I don't understand if Pete Rose and Joe Jackson are first time eligible. I understand they played in an era a long time ago, but if they're first time eligible, why wouldn't they go on with first time eligible guys? Why does it have to go to an era?
So to my understanding, what makes a player eligible for the writer's ballot is once they've been retired from the game for 5 years, they are a possibility to be placed on that ballot. They've also had to have had accrued 10 years of playing time in MLB, and then they could potentially go on the ballot. Now, then they have a finite window. It used to be 15 years. Now it's 10 that they can be on the ballot for as long as they maintain a minimum of 5% of the vote. Once that 10 years is up and that window, that 15-year gap is gone, then they can only be considered on era committees. And there's been many different iterations of that, but the current ones that matter, there's what's called the classic era. So prior to 1980 was the majority of the contributions for those players. Post 1980 would be like today's game, the modern era. And then the third committee is for executives, managers, umpires of those. the additional rule for them, if you're a certain age, I believe it's 63, and still actively involved in the game, you could be considered for that by that committee due to age, because the hall wants to get living guys in. So they added that on when they made these changes. So let's say in theory that for some crazy reason, Ichiro just happened. You mentioned him. Let's say for some reason they don't put him on the writer's ballot. Okay. There's no way that would have happened, but just play along with me. They don't put him on. The writers overlook him. That 15-year gap expands. And then the committees are going back in the annals of the history of the game, and they go, oh, wow, how did this guy Ichiro get overlooked and not be put on the writer's ballot? Now we could elect him through an era committee. They have never went back and put them on a writer's ballot if someone has been overlooked when that window is up, if that makes sense.
But there's nobody that's had a lifetime ban, though, like this.
No.
It seems like when you look at the list of what does it take to get on the writer's ballot, this number of years, check. This type of career, check. It's not like they were on it and then didn't get voted in, so they fell below the percentage and so they fell off. Like, none of those things happened. It just, I don't know. It seems to me like they should go straight to the writer's ballot, which I think would be extremely interesting to see how the writers voted on the writer's ballot if they were on. But I don't know. What, Darren, do you think that, I mean, Rose and Joe Jackson, you're on the era committee and they come across, are you a for sure yes, or is there anything that you hold back on?
No, I think I'd be a for sure yes on both. I think that the likelihood of somebody on that committee that's, our age or older who kind of lived through the Pete Rose thing might have a bad taste in their mouth. So maybe, but I think Joe Jackson, I don't know why anybody wouldn't vote for him at this point. Obviously, nobody that's on that committee was alive when that happened. They didn't have a bad taste in their mouth. It was a story they were probably told by their parents or grandparents. So I think Joe Jackson's got a great shot. I think Pete Rose has a really good shot. I think he should be there. I mean, obviously he holds some huge records, and even though he, to get those records, he played a little beyond his prime, but it is what it is. And he had a great career, and I think he absolutely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame based on his playing. And now that the ban's over, then I don't see a reason why he shouldn't be either. I would vote for both.
No, I don't think that. One of the things I've been hearing as people talk about this, and I don't tend to spend a lot of time thinking about off the field stuff, but there are people that do. And there are some people that are in the hall that have some questionable off the field beliefs, actions, or even on the field beliefs, actions that are in. But I'll just use an example of like Roberto Alomar. After he got in, some stuff came out. I don't know if Roberto Alomar gets in. I don't know if that comes out before he's elected. And people have been pointing to some of Pete Rose's off the field behavior besides just his gambling, but some of the other well, I don't even know if they're allegations. I think they're things that were court documents say happened. Does that prevent Pete Rose potentially from getting anything, Jake?
I think no. I think that in the case of like somebody that had something in the court of public opinion that was out there and was on the ballot, like I think of somebody that I love as a player, Tim Raines. He's in an elite stolen base club, over 800. At this point where we're looking at it now back, people are like, why wasn't he a Hall of Famer faster? Like, what, didn't he get in quickly? No, he was on the ballot until the very end. And it was largely because of the things that he was involved with off the field with drugs. And he was punished for that for a long time. I don't think that that's going to affect Rose because he's been paying that price for so long, unless the committee doesn't, like the hall itself, the board of directors behind closed doors doesn't want Rose in. Because I think that's very key, Greg, to your point of like, there isn't any precedent that says, well, they can't go on the writer's ballot. because this has never happened before. The
Mhm.
Major League Baseball commissioner has never wiped everyone off the ineligible list in mass because they're deceased. It's historic. But while MLB and the Hall of Fame are two separate entities, they technically are not, governed by the same person or the same board. I think from the Hall's perspective, that by putting it through one of the era committees, they can control the narrative. I'm not saying they will, but they have the opportunity to do so if they choose, because they can choose if they go on that ballot or not. It's only 8 names to be voted upon, and they control and handpick everybody that goes on that committee. Where the Baseball Writers of America, that's not the case. You have 10 years of credited writing, at a recognized publication, online or physical, and you're a member of the BBWAA, you get your voting credentials. That's how that works. The baseball or the Hall itself can't just revoke those. That's not the agreement they have.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's a good point, right? By putting them on the era committee, they do have a lot more control over how that plays out, if they have some ulterior motive. That's a good point.
And even if they want them in, right? The Hall's in the business of making money, even though they're a nonprofit museum. They want to sell tickets. They want people to come to Cooperstown. In what way do they benefit by having them both on the same era committee if they want both of them to get in? Wouldn't you want 2 historic years, separated by a few? They're both deceased. They're not giving speeches. So why put them in potentially the same year?
I agree. And that being said, I think my opinion would be Shoeless Joe would probably go first, because then there's less controversy and stuff around it, and they have more time to think about how they want to play it out with Pete Rose.
What would have been nice for the Hall of Fame is if they weren't in the same era, but because they're both pre-1980 as the major contributions, then that means they would both be that classic era. And so the classic era ballot, it would be hard to have one of them go on and not put the other one on, and then have, Ken Boyer on instead of Shoeless Joe. It would be hard to overlook one, even if that's what they wanted to happen. They could make that happen, but I think a lot of people would be like, what's happening here? Why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, Dom, his first reaction was, Shoeless Joe's going to be on the first one and not Pete. And Shoeless Joe's going to get in. And I told him I think there'll be more controversy caused by leaving Rose off the ballot the first go round. And I just don't think the Hall wants any part of that, whether they want him in or not. That I think he's got to be on that first ballot.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Now, you're not just a Hall of Fame enthusiast, but you're also a Hall of Fame collector. And when I look at your because again, when I think of Jake, I'm like, all right, this dude loves the Hall of Fame. He's passionate about statistical thresholds and things like that. But you collect Hall of Fame autographs, lot of them on balls. You collect Perez Steele. Again, these are just the things that pop into my head when I think of you. You collect Perez Steele autographed postcards. You collect T206. You collect. You're one of the. There are people who collect everything, but then there are people who collect a wide array. But I feel like they're very focused within that array, and I feel like that's where you fall. Is you collect a lot of different things, but specific things within a wide variety. Would you say that's a good assessment, or am I off?
I think you're spot on, man. Because if I make the statement that there are 25,000 items on my spreadsheet want list, you would react like, whoa, what? But if I then, supplement that with, well, I collect sets ranging from T206 to 1979 tops. I do the play balls. I do the Bowmans, the Redmans. I do the tall boy basketball sets. And then I'm collecting a rookie card, an autograph, a bobblehead, an autograph baseball of every Baseball Hall of Famer, of every major milestone club member. So 500 homers, 3,000 hits. I do perfect game pitchers and World Series Braves teams. And then anyone I deem historically significant to the game, like Fernando Valenzuela for Fernando Mania, or a Johnny Vandermeer for throwing back-to-back no-hitters. That's my collection in a nutshell. And even though my want list is 24,000 and something items, I'm at 63% completion.
Nice.
So while, yes, there are many things that I want, it's a very specific list. I do not go outside that list very often, pretty rarely.
Nice. That's a great list. I mean, I couldn't imagine having a list that big, just managing it. I think if I built a list that big and I started putting estimated prices of stuff into it, I would probably, my head would explode after about 150 to 200 things. But
I think so. Let's go right there. How there are some people who have amazing collections, and they have amazing collections because they have amazing funds in which to fund their amazing collection. And then there are people like us who are have more normal type budgets. So how, when you collect that wide of a variety, when there's 25,000 things on the list, and you go into, say, the National in 2 months, how do you set a target? How do you decide what are the next $500 going to be spent on when there's 25,000 things that you want to add? Like you have to make a decision of prioritizing them. How do you prioritize when you have 25,000 things? Like, take me through that process. So you're headed to the National, you're in your head, have a game plan. What does that game plan look like besides your spreadsheet with 25,000 names on it and a normal person budget, not $100,000?
I'm looking for, in a perfect world, I'm looking for two things to intersect. One, reaching the highest possible value item that I can, that I feel like is a key item to complete a set, or one of my top echelon autographs, something like that, that I feel like if it gets any higher, it's out of my reasonable range, right? I want that to intersect with what I feel is a good deal, right? So while in some people's minds, 25,000 items is overwhelming, I look at it as I have everything I could possibly want on this list. I've already researched all the values. I know what I want to pay for them. I have them all on my spreadsheet at my fingertips. Which one's a good deal? I don't care which one's next, generally speaking. Now, do I have times that I'm like, okay, I feel like this card is really going up. I want to go after this because I feel like this is what I would call a set killer. If I get this card, I'll complete this set someday because I have a lifetime hobby view of my collection. I started when I was 9 and I never quit. I never took the break. I never did the whole like, well, college girls' cards. Like, I never stopped. So I had that advantage going for me, but that's the perfect intersection for me. And for listeners that don't know, I'm a pastor for a living. So like my monthly budget for cards or anything else I want to spend on myself is $100. Now, 5 years ago, I started doing the sell to collect thing. Really brief synopsis of this. I don't talk about it publicly a lot, but essentially I needed funds. If I had the funds myself, I would have done them on my own. So how could I generate funds to increase my own buying power for my own collection, for better deals and for more cash flow to add bigger items? So I came up with the idea to get investors to give me cash that I buy cards with. I sell them. I get a cut of the profits. I've been doing that for 5 years, and that's why I've been able to add a lot of bigger things out of the realm of $100 budget a month because of
that's
that.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people try to use the hobby to pay for the hobby, and that's a great way to do that. Have you, besides, so say someone's listening, which, by the way, I want to paint the picture here for a second, because you're talking about your spreadsheets, and if you're just listening to this on Darren's channel right now, you hear this voice, and you may probably know Jake, but in the background he's got a beautiful display case of balls that are clearly labeled. I'm assuming they're Hall of Famers in
Most of them.
perfect rows and perfect columns. So when I envision the how organized your spreadsheets are, and you say I've researched them all, I know what they all are, they're in my spreadsheets. Like, I completely believe this. I completely believe. Is that is that part of the fun, the research of what do I want, the planning? Because sometimes people think the only way to have fun in the hobby is to buy. But I'm hearing you say that you're spending a lot of time doing research, and it seems like that's a lot of fun. Is For someone out there with a limited budget, is coming up with your game plan like something that is a good way to have free entertainment in the hobby?
Mm-hmm. I've spent hundreds of thousands of hours constructing that spreadsheet. It would blow your mind. It has like 80 something tabs on it. Most of them are vintage sets, card number, name. Do I have it? Do I not? What do I value it at? How much did I pay for it? How much have I got in the whole set? What's the percentage completion? That feeds into pivot tables for my overall collection. It tells me how complete I am on like 50s tops and 50s Bowmans and the 50s as a decade and vintage cards overall and Hall of Famers and playing days runs of players, what I've paid so far for my whole collection, what I value my whole collection at. Darren, the question that or thing that you mentioned earlier, it's one of my next tasks that I want to do of what the cost remaining would be to completion. That's a complicated formula I'm working on. But that's so much fun for me. I love that. And then that leads me to the strategy, right? Okay, like I sit down all the time and like run this through my head of like, what set killers should I target next to make it most likely that I can complete these parts of my collection. Then I can add the little stuff as I go, as it falls in my lap. Is that a better strategy? T206, for example, like the Ray Dimmitt and the Bill O'Hara have really jumped up, the St. Louis variations.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to do a 520 someday, like how important is it as I grab one of those before they're out of my reach? Weighing that against a, REA auction that just happened. And in terms of Hall of Fame autographs, it was historic.
Mm-hmm.
There was like 3 Huey Jennings autographs, multiple Wagners, tons of Roos. Do I need to target one of those now? I may not have another opportunity. There was 2 Effa Manley autographs. That's the strategy that kind of runs through my head all the time that feeds from all my spreadsheet work and tinkering.
Darren, you and I have talked a lot about lists over the last 2 years, year and a half or so since we've been doing this. And hearing Jake's list, in a certain regard, it feels overwhelming, but in a certain regard, it feels relaxing, because when you kind of have your targets all nailed down, then it feels like you at least know where you're going. If I was going to drive to Orlando, I would love to know which roads I'm going to take before I start driving, instead of trying to figure out on the way.
Right.
Where are you on lists right now? And is hearing Jake talk about his list, does that make you go, oh yeah, lists are a good idea? Or is it just like, no, I'm just going to keep winging it?
I still like lists, but I mean, I'm branching out a little bit with, I've been getting into some vintage football recently and some other stuff. And because I know that I like to branch out, that, I suck at focus. I'm realizing that having a list is good because it allows me to not look past certain cards that I know I'm going to want. Like, my list basically consists of stuff at this point of cards that I would love to have at some point someday. I have a list that's probably got 100 or so cards on it. And if I pick one up from it, I'll cross it off. But I don't necessarily buy from that list. Let me rephrase. That list is not driving my purchases anymore like it was previously. It's now, I have them there. So if I'm at a show and I'm like, I don't really know what I want to buy, then I can pull the list up and look at it and say, oh, here's a couple things that would fit my budget that might be at the show. Or I could do what I did at Strongsville and say, I'm not going with the list because I don't want to not find something that's on my list and then end up buying a bunch of cards that I never planned on buying ever, but absolutely love after I picked them up.
Jake, let me ask you something. So you said that affordability meets going to be unaffordable potentially in the near future
That's a
meets
good.
getting
By the way, that's an awesome strategy.
versus meets getting a good deal. So for people listening at home, you picked up at last year's national a green portrait T206 Cobb.
Mhm.
That is that because you felt like that card met those that was the intersection of all of those axes?
Yes, and I'll share specifics because I don't mind. T206 is one of the sets I want to complete. It's one of my main focuses, as I feel that it's one of the ones that are most likely to get out of my reach. You know, if all the commons tick up $10 a piece, you know, we're talking hundreds of dollars just right there. Not to mention if the Hall of Famers go up. And the Cobb green background, even in low condition where I, you know, work and operate, there are only two cards in a 520 that are more valuable than that Cobb. And that's my aforementioned Dimmitt and O'Hara St. Louis variations, right? So outside of those, Cobb was like the card in terms of price if I ever want to complete a 520. I also have a personal affinity for Cobb, and I love the green background. So like all that aligned. It was an idea that I wanted to save towards that, but I wasn't dead set on buying one. Like I didn't have to have one at the National. And the week of, one actually popped up on eBay, and I purchased it from there, and I paid $3,750 for it. And at that time, they were selling. I didn't see one at the National for less than like 5,500.
Yeah.
So I was thrilled with the price. I was thrilled with the look of the card. It hit that like set killer, you know, component. It all intersected perfectly. So yeah, that would be like a home run. Like I hit everything on that one. But
Plus, that's a sweet card.
Yeah.
thank
I
you.
mean, just the green Cobb in general is such a sweet
Yeah.
card.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
Now,
we must have bought ours. We must have bought our green Cobbs around the same time because I bought mine. I
Very
bought mine
close.
like a month after the National last year.
Mm-hmm. When at the National, like that theory passed on. So like that was a huge part of my budget at that point, right? So I went to the National. I already had my Grail card that I was like hoping to land, right?
Right.
And so now my approach is what I just said, like where do those things intersect? And I remember showing it to Greg at a meet and greet that I picked up the John Titus T206 in an old mill back. It's already a popular card, and I paid like half of market value, and it was a no brainer. Like Titus, not a big Hall of Famer, but a decently key card in the set.
Mm,
Great price, no question. I bought a Ray Schalk Perez Steel autograph. Same thing happened. They go for like a little over 200. Guy wanted like 125. No brainer. Here you go.
nice.
You know, that kind of approach.
yeah.
That's solid because I basically take a similar approach, except for the buying it for a good deal piece. I've got the cards that I want that might go up in value too much, or I won't be able to afford them later. Plus, I really want the card, but I suck at getting the good deal piece because I mean I especially on the and that's my problem. I think I most overpay on the most expensive ones percentage wise, which that's not always the best. It's not the best financial strategy, but it is what it is.
When ironically, I think that the way that I've constructed my list, at least for me, for my personality, it has forced me to be patient over time.
Mhm.
Because I the way my lists are constructed, I can't complete them fast. It's impossible.
Right.
So like I put myself in a mindset of it's a long-term goal, and I've got to stretch the dollar everywhere I can if I want to even come close to hitting it. So like I've forced myself to be patient, and there's so many options, 25,000 items, whatever is the good deal is next is okay.
Mhm.
There are plenty of other things I'm going to have to pick up after that.
We should have had this conversation a year ago because last year I had the list and I'm like, how could I finish the list as fast as possible? So I finished the year-long list by July, and then I created a new list and
I
bought way
remember
more
that.
stuff than I was planning to buy. Had I had a list that was so big, I knew there was no rush because there was no chance of completing it anytime soon. I might have bought fewer cars last year.
So Jake, another thing I think about when I think about you is I think about how you have like this. I don't want to say disdain, but you have this sort of lack of interest in grading companies and graded cards. And again, hey, we all collect differently. I don't think anybody's right, anybody's wrong. We all do what's best for us. I don't have, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong because I don't think you're wrong. I don't know if you're right. I don't think you're wrong, though. What is your, I mean, most of us in the hobby at this point are getting cards that are graded by the major grading companies, and you pretty openly are like, nah, no.
Mm-mm.
Tell people that are listening who maybe are on the fence on grading, aren't graded card people, are graded card people, like make the argument for us on why people should consider doing it the way you're doing it.
So something to backtrack just a little, something that I think that my lists also allow me to do is it forces me to philosophically really determine what the purpose of my collection is, right? Like when you make a lifetime list for my hobby, it forces me like, what's the driving purpose here? And for me, I want to build a museum to the history of the game. That sounds very John Mangini, but I had that before I knew John. And I think that like what I do with Hall of Fame, what I do with vintage sets, what I do with the autograph component, the bobbleheads, the baseballs, that what I've constructed my list and made it up of, that's what it will accomplish. So then if I have this lifetime goal and I think that that list is made up of a lot of things, I need to stretch my hobby dollar in every way that I can. Now, in addition to, I've learned over time that I pretty much know what are real cards, what are fake ones. I'm a little more cautious with, the big stuff. If I was to buy a Gowdy Ruth, I'm going to buy a raw one from a very reputable dealer or someone that I know. I'm going to buy it in person, all of those things, right? But I don't think anybody's faking the 1958 Topps Nellie Fox at the same time. I'm also a low grade, low condition collector. I care about what I think the card looks like. I don't care what anyone else thinks what the card looks like, especially not someone that I have to pay more money after the fact for, or myself, in order for someone else to tell me that. The other big argument for grading is, well, what is my next of kin going to do? If I die, it'll be so much easier if all my cards are graded. They'll know what they're looking at and so on and so forth. I would argue not really. They're still not going to know what they're doing. They're still not going to know where to list them, what to do, who to sell them to, all those things. And we on YouTube are blessed that we have many friends in the community that it would be really easy for me to be like, hey, Amy, that's my wife's name. If something happens to me, call Darren about the handful of cards that I have graded, and call Greg about my autographs, and they'll help you through that. I think that's more beneficial than just the cards being graded helping Amy to sell them. And my last statement, and then I'll turn it over to you, Greg.
Yeah.
Contrary to popular belief, I love grading. I love grading because it takes millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in the hobby off the table, put towards something else that I don't want, and less competition for the things that I do want. So I love it. It's great. Yeah.
Oh, man, there's about 5 things I could ask you as a follow-up.
So you decide which of the 5, and I'm going to say, I think you're 100% right on your opinion, right? It's your opinion, like you said at the beginning, right? It's your opinion, so it's right. It's not right or wrong. It's right because it's your opinion, and I admire the way you collect. You chose to collect the way that you collect. You decided it early on, and you stick to it. You're not getting influence in any way by anybody else. So you came up with your plan and you're sticking to your plan. And I respect that because I get influenced all the time.
A lot of people, and I don't think you're wrong. Like, I totally respect it. I could totally see myself in your shoes feeling that way. And at times I do. And I think that I have a hard time settling on where I am and what I want to do. And I am jealous of your ability to center yourself on what what you are and where you're headed. Like I think that's much more difficult to do than you've made it seem in your
Mm,
describing yourself. Like I think that's difficult and that's fantastic that you can do it. When you say you're a low grade card collector, um, I respect that too. You know, we have a lot of friends in the hobby who Chris from Missouri. I think he
Mhm.
would consider himself a low grade card collector. He's about having it. He doesn't need it to be pristine. We have other friends in the hobby who collect museum quality pieces
Mhm.
where they'd rather have much fewer cards, but they want museum quality stuff and beautiful examples. I mean, Darren and I, our buddy Dave, who
mhm.
showed some of his
Yep.
cards at the National. Yeah, he
Crazy stuff.
crazy stuff,
Crazy stuff.
museum quality stuff, best of the best names, best of the best sets, best of the best condition. Neither one of you are right or wrong. Why for you is it about the 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 quantity of low grade instead of the lower quantity of higher grade, or I'm using grade, but you
Mhm.
know what I mean, quality of the example.
He's got 25,000 cards on his list. That's why.
Is that why you'd rather have 25,000 cards than have 20 high end, high grade, big names?
I, I think it comes back to what I believe is the purpose of my collection. Like if I brought somebody over here and I had like the highest grade of the highest grade of the highest quality, and I had like a dozen cards, like here's my little box, and these are awesome, they're incredible, but like tour's over, 12 cards, there it was.
Hmm.
I would rather, like, I love when people do come over here to visit and come in the baseball room. I'd be like, name a Hall of Famer. Like, tell me your favorite, like, historical player. And there's a pretty good chance that I'm going to either be able to pull out, an autograph baseball, or like a playing days card of them, with exceptions, of course. I don't have everybody. I don't have all the 25,000 items yet. Um, but I love doing that. And I feel like I can tell a more complete story of the history of the game, which is like my driving purpose for my collection,
Yeah.
than I could with less items that were really nice. I don't think for me, the condition doesn't really change the story for me. If anything, the lower grade tells a better story, with like this card came out of a tobacco pack from 1910, and that's why it looks like this because it was carried around in some kid's pocket, whatever. I think that's a better story than this one survived from the factory and it's a 10, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Does value matter much to you?
Yes, I do care about my collection's value. If I didn't, I wouldn't spend as much time tracking it as I do. um, is it going to be the be all end all if it all goes down? No. But I've put a lot of time and effort and money already into it. I would rather it not be worth zero.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm with you there.
I'm good if it just maintains. Like I'd be happy. I'm cool with that.
Yeah. Well, now you mentioned a second ago, being on YouTube, you have lots of friends, you can give instructions to your wife, but you also know, especially as a pastor, that we don't always get to plan how
Mhm.
and when things happen to us. Have
Mhm.
are those conversations that you put a plan in place for some of that stuff? And what about the person who's not on YouTube or
Mm.
is listening to this because they love cards? They don't have a channel. They don't know who's who, and they can't give their wife three or four phone numbers. Should that person care more about potentially having their cards graded than a person like you who has resources to direct your spouse to?
I think that's a great question. Where I would start is I'm 34 years old and we have a living will. Like there's a plan if something were to happen to me and my wife, my collections included in that and where things would go and who would do what and who to contact and so on and so forth. Now, if you weren't on YouTube, you didn't have a lot of connections. I would like to think everybody has somebody in their life that if something happened to them and their spouse, that they have someone else that they would trust. For example, your kids, whoever, would be like godparents or, what's it called? Guardians of your children, or the trustee of like a fund, that they would be in charge of until they reach a certain age. I would like to think that everyone has that or would consider choosing that. And even if you didn't go that route, there's still like, if you really wanted, you have a collection, get in touch with like an auction house and be like, look, hey, whatever, I just want to have a plan in place if something happens to me. Like, just tell me the number that I can leave for my wife and she'll call you guys and she knows to send it all to this auction house. This is the one I've chosen. I really think it's as simple as that, whether your cards are graded or not. I think most people, especially people like my age, don't want to think about a will or like where your stuff goes, or like people don't typically plan that. Even guys that are further on in their like life and collecting careers, they say things like, you hear it all the time on YouTube, well, my kids have no interest in it. I may end up liquidating before I move on. I don't know. We hear that all the time. I think it's just about making the decision to intentionally have a plan, regardless of what that looks like.
I well said. But I also will counter with this because like I've had several people reach out to me and some of them I've visited and they've said, I don't know what I have. I don't know what it's worth. I don't know. Nothing's graded. I just know that I like having my cards and I don't want my wife to go down to the local card shop and get ripped off. And a lot of those people don't have things that necessarily you can send to REA.
Right.
Like REA, you can't just say, I'm going to send you a binder, liquidated. They go, what are you talking about? Like, we don't want this. Like, I don't think that, I think that there are a lot of people out there who have very reasonable collections that aren't exceptional collections that would be auction house collections, but they also don't want to be their spouse to be taken advantage of. And what I've said to those people, the people that have contacted me, I go, listen, here's the deal. Put my name and phone number in the binder in the front. If anything happens to me, contact Greg. I will help your spouse figure out what to do with it. And it's not because I'm gonna buy it. It's just because I want to bring that person some peace of mind that I don't have any problem answering a phone call from somebody and giving them some, advice of helping them out. Like that's just the kind of person that I want to be. But I do know a lot of people worry about that. And 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 the reason I'm bringing it up now is because you're a raw card guy. And I do believe that it's a lot easier if somebody doesn't know what they have. If you just type in what's on the flip of a PSA slab, it's a really easy to figure out generally what that is for value. One of the ways I pay for my hobby is I don't have investors that I buy cards and then split profits. I go to estate sales and I buy junk and then I sell the junk and I use the money to pay for my cards. And the only reason that works is because some people don't really care and they don't want to research what their junk is worth. And I'm willing to put in the sweat equity on what the junk is worth to make $25 on that piece of junk. But that takes some effort from me. And it's because some of the stuff you can't just type in what it is. Like you have to kind of have some base knowledge. And I guess that's the part that I still struggle with a little bit. But as far as the ungraded collector, I totally get it, dude. I totally get it, and I totally respect it. And I like touching cards, and I like smelling cards. I like feeling them. I like looking at them without being entombed. Like
The binder,
I
man.
under
The binder.
the binder is fantastic. I have binders behind me. I mean, I love flipping through binders. Um, I don't know. Like that's the part I continue to kind of struggle with. But um, Darren, do these thoughts go through your head? But your stuff's mostly slabbed.
Yeah, most of my stuff is slab, but yeah, I mean, I it does. I mean, I have a really good friend. Been friends with him for over 20 years, and he's I trust him completely, and he's got insane contacts at multiple auction houses. He's got insane contacts within the hobby at tons of different levels, and if something ever happened to me, he said that he'd fly out, he'd grab all the stuff that's worth anything, and get that all liquidated and get the money to my wife or my kids.
Again, I think it's easier for us. And again, the reason I bring it up is just because I've had a lot of people ask me questions about it, and it's something that could prevent people from enjoying the hobby. If you're struggling to enjoy the hobby because you're worried that this will end up like my dad says to me all the time, I'll go to an estate sale, I'll drag my dad along with me to an estate sale, and he'll say, don't let these people sell my stuff at an estate sale because they don't charge enough, and it's like there's something to that. Anyway, we've talked about that long enough.
So actually, I had a question for Jake. We'll move. We'll go off topic from the morbid death conversation real quick.
Yeah.
So,
I think that'd be right.
Yeah. So actually, I did have a question for you that has literally nothing to do with any of the stuff we've talked about. But since we got you on, you've got the Hall of Fame autograph list.
Yeah,
And I
the
appreciate you sending that over
YouTube
to me.
Hall of Fame autograph registry.
Yes, the Hall of Fame autograph registry. My bad. And thank you for saying that to me. I had a question about, like a general question about that. If you have an object that's autographed by multiple people, I'm assuming that those all count, right? Like if I have a baseball signed by like 7 Hall of Famers, hypothetically, I get to check off all 7 of those names, or do they have to be individual?
Yeah, so like when people ask me that question, there are there are actually 3 different tabs on there, but one's for autographs and then one's for autographed baseballs, right? So like
Right.
autograph tab, when people ask me, I'm like, use your own, judgment. It's really your list, but autograph cards, pack pulled, TTM, 8x10s, magazines, index cards, all that stuff. As far as like multi-signed items that would fall under that, like if you had a 8x10 signed by a bunch of different guys.
Hmm.
If you want to mark them all, mark them all. If you feel like you're only going to count it for red roughing that's on there, you do you, big dog.
Okay, cool. I was just curious.
Yeah,
I actually
that's
don't
how
have.
tell
I
people.
actually don't have any, but I have a collector friend that he's been really big into buying autographed team balls from like key seasons for the Yankees. So he'll get them and he'll send me pictures of them, or I'll look at them, like, and I'm looking at the thing, like I just saw him a couple weeks ago, and he just picked up a 27 Yankees team ball, and yeah, and I was looking at him like, holy crap, like I could check off like a dozen I could check off like a dozen names from this bad boy, hypothetically. It's not mine.
See, and I'm weird. I have a 1970 Mets ball, so the year after the Miracle Mets, and it's signed by Hodges, Seaver, Ryan. I only count it as my Hodges ball. I don't count it as Ryan and Seaver. I have separate ones for them. I only count it as one. But I'm
Okay,
weird.
so hypothetically, if I were to buy a ball that had a bunch, I would use it for all of them until I picked up something individual, and then that ball would slowly diminish to basically whoever's last on the ball that I don't have a separate autograph for.
That's what I would do, but that's
Okay,
just
I like
me.
that's a good idea. All right, cool.
Well, we're at 50 minutes, and that has gone by quickly.
That has gone by really quickly.
It has gone by quickly. We usually try to keep these under an hour, and you know how I go down these rabbit holes of rabbit holes with where I tend to pull things. Darren, what other than what you just asked, we've got the man right here on video. Anything else you wanna pick his brain on?
I mean, I did have a question, but you asked Al the question, so I mean, I could ask Jake too. When you pick up really rare autographs that aren't graded,
Mm.
how do you feel? I mean, you talked about the cards, but the cards, especially like a T206, right? You could feel it, you could smell it, you could tell, yeah, this is real or no. Like this thing smells like it just came out of like an inkjet printer, right? For autographs, though, how are you like when you buy, because you have, when I was looking at the list, you have some pretty incredible autographs, and how are you comfortable buying some of those? I mean, I don't know, maybe all of your really high end ones are graded or they're press steel or something, but let's say they're not. Like let's say it's an index card, right? Let's say it's an index card of a Hall of Famer from one of the first 5 classes of the Hall of Fame. How are you comfortable buying that, and kind of what's your thought process on that? I'm curious.
So the first thing that I do, and not everyone can do this, I realize that, but the first thing that I do is I text my little YouTube Hall of Fame autograph group text with Frank and Bill and Mike and Chris, and I say, "Hey guys, what do you think?" And like Frank's opinion carries a lot of weight
Okay.
in that decision. He knows like every big autograph authenticator in the country. He's very well researched, very well spoken. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his channel. I love his channel, all his autograph analysis. I've watched his videos, like for ones that he's done in reference to that. That's one. Another component is, who am I buying it from? Is this a big time, reputable, well known dealer? Like example, Jim Stenson, who was an autograph authenticator for a long time, is in the autograph selling business now. And like, I trust an authenticated autograph from him, no question.
Okay.
Thirdly, I'll actually grab the book really fast. Thirdly, anyone can do this. Often on Frank's channel, he references this book, Baseball Hall of Fame Autographs, a Reference Guide by Ron Kurjan.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So like all the autograph analysis that like Frank would do on his channel, where he talks about this is a fake because of this loop, this is a secretarial because of this, here are exemplars. That's all in this book.
Oh, nice.
So when I got this book, the first thing I did was check that Ruth autograph right there against what this book said and what Frank said.
Nice.
It's real, thankfully.
There you go.
That's a great question, and that's
you sent me a
great
picture of
answer
that,
too.
like a really clear picture of it. I've seen a lot of Ruth signatures. Absolutely, yours is real.
Yeah, but
that's fantastic.
That's what I do.
Well, we appreciate your time. It was an honor to have you as our May guest on Off Topic. For people now, I assume a lot of people know you, but in case they don't, where can people find you if you want to shout out the best places to find more Legends Never Die content? Where would they go?
So Legends Never Die on YouTube. My handle on YouTube, if you just type it in that way, is Legends Never Die Collection, which is my Instagram handle. And Legends Never Die is also my Twitter handle, but I don't use that very often. So mainly YouTube and Instagram.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, Jake is a great guy. I can attest to it.
Same.
I got to meet him in person in Cleveland for the National. He was driving a ginormous truck, and and it was a pleasure to see you in person, and it was a pleasure to have you on. It's always fun for us to kind of go, who do we want this month? Who do we want this month? And it was pretty quick that we're like, let's call Jake. Let's get him on. So this was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Jake. Appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Yeah, man. I love y'all's show. I've watched every single episode of Off Topic.
Thank you.
I'm thankful I finally got to be on. It was great hanging out with you guys. I wish we had like 4 hours to do this.
I know.
That was so much fun.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Darren, you want to wrap it up for us?
Yeah, so thanks again, Jake. Appreciate you coming on. Greg, it's always good to see you. Everybody else, thanks for watching. If you've made it, well, usually we do if you made it through, but if you made it through all the way to the end, the code word for this will be Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame. That is the signal that you made it to the very end and you are a true
Yes,
off-topic aficionado.
there you go. All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching. We'll talk to you guys later.